member here for many years. He was the mayor. He was also a council member in Buncombe County and also the chairman over there. And some of the things that he got done are significant. 911 was started with him over there. Project Access, which is a way for folks who don't have any money to get medical care if they're not on Medicaid or Medicare. He also went ahead and was instrumental in getting a vote on the zoning for Buncombe County. As it turns out, it ended up being voted down by the people, but he planted the seed and future boards then put that into action. But I think we've all benefited from it. So please keep him in your prayers. Thank you. Announcements. There was a meeting of the Bear Wives in this room a couple weeks ago, and it was quite amazing. I know that Pam came to that meeting, and I learned a lot. Unfortunately, I learned more than what I really wanted to hear. These bears, one thing, have a sense of smell that is 7 times greater than a bloodhound. So if you think that, you put something outside your grill, even though they say clean your grills, you're not going to clean your grill good enough for that bear not to do it. And so bird feeders are definitely the thing. There's no question. But I guess the thing that really got me the most was that they're basically going to be here to stay. They track bears in Asheville and put collars on them. And those bears, and tracking, have a range of about 4 to 5 miles. Well, and they don't leave. They track bears, and they've taken them 10 miles, 50 miles, 200 miles, and the bears come back. So we've got some issues in the future. I think that one of the best ways to describe it would be, it's hard to put the boy back on the farm when he's seen fire reef. And these bears know where they can come to get good food, places to stay. So how we're going to deal with this is going to be an issue that not only this board, but future boards are going to have to figure out. Because it's not just one cub that we used to see growing up, maybe 2. Now you got 3, and sometimes 4. I just left the house. There was mama or 3 cubs out there in the back just frolicking around. And they've been there all summer, so I'm afraid they're just going to be there. So how are we going to do this? I'm not even sure the wildlife knows how we're going to do it. But the 3 suggestions that I'd given before, this is when I was on the board some 10, 15 years ago. We need to increase the bag limit, we need to increase the hunting season, and we need to decrease some of the protected area. Because without that, the bears are just going to keep populating. So. But at least it was a good meeting, and I'm glad there was as many people attended. But even though, as I said to the folks there, you represent people that really want to help solve this problem, but you are less than 1/10 of 1% of the population right now. So all of us, tell our neighbors, tell our relatives, please, the best we can do right now is just to try not to encourage any more from coming in. Also, too, I want to go ahead and announce that on 2 weeks from tonight, I'd like to call a special meeting of the board and for us to discuss issues that we've unfortunately got in our finance department. And I would like very much for everyone to attend. So that'll be posted. Also, too, there'll be time there for citizens to make statements, ask questions, and at least from the mayor, and I hope the rest of the board, will give answers. So please keep that in mind. Ethics statement. In accordance with the Code of Ethics adopted by the council, all council members have a duty to conduct the affairs of the governing board in an open and public manner, free of conflicts of interest. Is there any item on the agenda, the outcome of which will have a direct, substantial, or readily identifiable financial impact for any council member, his or her family, or close business associate?
No.
Does any council member have a financial interest in any public contract coming before this council today?
No.
There being none, all council members have a duty and an obligation to vote. And now, we want to have an award. So Josh is going.
Chief Parker and the Executive Director of the Association of Chiefs of Police, Bill Hollingshead.
Chief Parker has instructed me to sit, is that correct?
That sounds
All right. I want to do what Chief Parker says.
They all do.
Mr. Mayor, members of the Town Council, it's my honor to be here tonight to be able to talk a little bit about accreditation and what that means to your police department and to your community as a whole. The Black Mountain Police Department completed an off-site file review of the North Carolina Law Enforcement Accreditation Program in March of 2024, which consisted of 116 standards related to critical law enforcement functions such as training, recruitment and selection of personnel, use of force, law enforcement operations, property and evidence, and professional standards. The off-site file review was followed by a site-based assessment on March the 20th of this year, where North Carolina law enforcement accreditation assessors met with agency staff, elected officials, and community members to confirm the agency's compliance with accreditation standards. This agency, your Black Mountain Police Department, has demonstrated compliance with all applicable standards and is the very first law enforcement agency to complete this program under the new first edition standards manual, which is approved by both commissions. So I think that's very important and you should be proud. We have accredited 6 other agencies across the entire state under our pilot program. But once we initiated the pilot program, kind of learned from it, we adopted the first edition standards manual, and the Black Mountain Police Department is the first department to have completed those 116 standards under that first edition manual. The community and the department benefits from this process because it reinforces an agency's ability to maintain the highest standards of law enforcement services that represent current professional practices. And I want to emphasize that word current, because best practices as they evolve in the areas of leadership development, crisis intervention, data systems, evidence management, facility needs, and other critical areas, the North Carolina Law Enforcement Accreditation Program will assist those agencies in developing policies and procedures to ensure that we are meeting the needs of our officers, our employees, and our communities as a whole. And I do want to change hats from the chairman of the accreditation committee over to the director of the Chiefs Association, because I'm also proud to mention, and I don't think you knew I was going to do this, but the fact that the Black Mountain Police Department is the recipient of a wellness grant from our association, and that grant is in excess of $26,000. That grant will enable Chief Parker and his staff to provide embedded behavioral health services to members of the Black Mountain Police Department. While we all can agree that physical fitness and wellness are imperative, we also can't forget that psychological health is just as, if not more important, to our officers and our support personnel. I applaud Chief Parker and the entire PD staff in implementing such a program. Thank you. So on behalf of the North Carolina Law Enforcement Accreditation Committee, I'd like to formally recognize the Black Mountain Police Department, you, the mayor and the town council, and the entire Black Mountain community, and present this certificate of completion and compliance as a fully accredited agency through the North Carolina Law Enforcement Accreditation Program. Chief.
Number one, I want to say that the only thing I was kind of a driver to this. This could not have been done without Stacy Cox. She was amazing in the work that she did. It was tireless work. She worked her fingers to the bone. Major Chris Kuhn was amazing in helping drive and make sure that everything was done, and Lieutenant Joe Kidd. And there was actually a staff of 8 people that met weekly to make sure that we were following all the policies and procedures over a 3-year period. So this took us 3 years to get to where we needed to be. And I just appreciate this staff more than I can say. I can't say enough about them. So that's where my thanks goes.
Citizens of Black Mountain are lucky to have such a dedicated police force. So if you see them out, whether it's tomorrow or next week or next month, say you're proud of them. I'm sure they'd love to hear it. And next we will have a proclamation. I'll let Vice Mayor do the proclamation.
Proclamation in memory of Chester Thomas, Tom Sobel Jr., November 5th, 1942, September 4th, 2024. Whereas Tom Sobel Jr. was born and raised in Black Mountain and was a proud alumnus of East Carolina University. And whereas Tom significantly contributed to local government and community development during his career by serving as an alderman in Black Mountain from 1968 to 1977, and mayor of Black Mountain from 1977 to 1984. And whereas Tom continued his service to local government by serving as a Buncombe County Commissioner from 1984 to 1996, including County Commissioner Chair from 1996 to 2000. And whereas during his service in local government, Tom helped develop local infrastructure such as libraries, swimming pools, and soccer fields, and was instrumental in construction of the new Owen High School in Black Mountain, always advocating for quality education and adequate school funding. And whereas Tom served his community on various boards, including Chairman of the North Carolina State Personnel Commission for 10 years, the United Way Board of Asheville-Buncombe County for 18 years, Asheville-Buncombe Chrome Stoppers Chairman and member of the Black Mountain Savings Bank Board from 1999 to 2022, where he served as chairman from 2007 to 2022. And whereas Tom, along with his family, founded Sober House of Furnishings in 1970. He also owned Valley Realty and Construction for 30 years and was a certified North Carolina residential appraiser from 1991 until his retirement in 2022. His outstanding services were recognized with many awards, notably the Order of the Longleaf Pine in 2000 by Governor Jim Hunt. Now, therefore, I, Archie Portillo Jr., Vice Mayor of the town of Black Mountain, and on behalf of the Black Mountain Town Council, do hereby wish to express our condolences to the family of Tom Sobel Jr. and wish to honor his service to the Black Mountain community and Buncombe County.
Thank you, Archie.
You're welcome, Tom.
Thank you, folks. Appreciate that. One last thing. Feather in my brother, my big brother. He was my big brother.
Yes, sir.
Never missed a meeting. Never missed a meeting as an alderman, a mayor, a council member, a Buncombe County Commission, or as the chairman. Nice record.
Yeah.
All right, next we got citizen comment, Lynn Swan.
Thank you
Please
very
come
much.
up. And you know the drill, 3 minutes.
I think I'm supposed to say where I live?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Give me your name and address.
Right. I'm Lynn Swan. I live at 101 South Park Lane in Black Mountain. And I want to first thank the board for considering funding to the senior center at Lakeview for the meals. There has been a vast increase in attendance for the lunches. I also, on the subject of the Lakeview Center, want to ask Jamie about painting the deck. And finally, regarding the Lakeview Center, we had partial paving from the pavilion parking lot up to the deck of the clubhouse this summer. I had been told by someone else that that paving was for handicapped people to be able to get to the lunch site with walkers or wheelchairs because of the parking problem that we have with the pool. However, those people can't actually get to the lunch site with the paving having been stopped right there at the deck. The paving needs to be extended under the deck and meet up with the pavement on the other side that comes in from the parking lot on the playground side.
Don't you have a door on that north side?
And stairs. People with wheelchairs and walkers can't.
No, there's a door on there's two doors entering into that downstairs.
Yes, sir, but our lunch side is upstairs. We've asked for an elevator and we don't have that yet either. They can't get upstairs to the meal site. That's the problem. They can get to the building, but they still can't get inside because to go through the gravel under the deck or around the deck to get to the remainder asphalt and all the way around the parking lot and up to the handicap ramp, it's still problematic. They can't maneuver that. Just saying, okay. Thank you very much for that. And the only other thing that I wanted to bring up tonight was to ask who's responsible for the cleanup of damaged trees, tree removal, and debris that's already down after the tornado.
Check with Josh later.
Okay, done. Thank you much.
Thank you.
South Park Lane is a real problem.
Next up, Dan Cordell.
Mayor, Council. Dan Cordell, 18 Chestnut Lodge Road, Black Mountain. I just have a question on item E of 9 on this Norfolk Southern right-of-way. It says that there's going to be a motion or a suggested motion to move or direct staff to post the area as no parking and contact Norfolk Southern to discuss options. Why are we spending time and personnel to put town money into signs and their time when we haven't even talked to the railroad yet? It's their property. Why are we involved in it? I think the railroad is responsible for this. And I know in the past they haven't played well with others as far as getting them to agree to anything. So just a question, why we're doing this and why we're not contacting them to take care of this problem. Thank you.
Casey LaCourse.
Hello.
Good day. Give your name and address and keep them.
Of course.
3 minutes.
Yes. So I just moved here in February. My name is Cassie LaCourse.
Excuse me.
That's okay. And we live on Orchard Street, 102 Orchard Street, Black Mountain. And I am just here to say something about number 6, the public hearing for the text amendment for chapter 4. That is my business. I own a local retail business, and I just wanted to introduce myself and say that I look forward to being open and getting permit and serving the community. And that's it.
Very good. Thank you for taking the time to come. That's all that is signed up.
Mr. Mayor, I have one more that was sent in to me to read from Mr. Bill Christie, if I could.
Okay.
I'm writing to urge the council and staff to alter the current parking on the southbound side of Broadway from the current pull-in spaces to parallel parking as it is on the northbound side. I realize this will decrease the parking spaces. However, I think that safety should outweigh that. There actually are plenty of other spaces to park in town that may require a little walking. You could make an appropriate number of handicap spots for those unable to walk from the other parking lots. I have seen many instances of cars having a hard time backing out and almost hitting other cars. Additionally, the pedestrians, presumably our guests, walk out at almost any time without regard to cars and seem to presume that everywhere on those blocks are legitimate pedestrian crossings. My fear is that failure to act is gambling with the near certain occurrence of some accident in the future that could range from property damage to loss of life. I urge that these safety concerns be primary ones in thinking about this issue. Thanks for your consideration. And that was Bill Christie, 108 9th Street.
All right.
short little presentation concerning the Ridgecrest Connector construction potential funding.
So as you know, we worked through a feasibility study with Ridgecrest Connector that was presented to you all from our consultants at Kimberly Horn not terribly long ago. And toward the end of that process, we applied for construction funding for this project through Buncombe County's passive open space bond. And we went through an interview process, site visits, until about halfway through I thought we had not a chance of getting funded. And then I was very surprised when they called and said that we have been recommended for full funding in their current funding scenario for the $705,000. That represents about 60% of the total project costs, and we have 2 other grants cooking for the balance of that project that do have some match element. We'll talk a little bit more about that next meeting with the Great State Trails application, and the green being a federal grant for engineering. So this is just to let you know that this is not official until the County Commission meets on October 15th. But it was a public meeting and it was good news, so I thought it was worth sharing with you all. And just letting you know where we are with that.
Jessica, can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
This is maybe more accounting than this, but when we accept a grant like that, it goes into our total budget, correct? You know, expenses and revenue.
Yes, you have to correct.
So the bottom line of our budget is going to reflect all the grants that we receive. I just wanted to clarify that because there seems to be some confusion around how grants show up in our budget.
Yes, and unfortunately Tammy's out sick, so she can't answer that. But ultimately, yes, it is reflected. You have to recognize that revenue in those liability accounts. And then they are sectioned off into project ordinances, so they are sort of set aside specifically.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, consent agenda. 5A will be your monthly property tax collection report. 5B, your annual, this will be something new because we're at the end of the property tax year, annual property tax settlement and order of collection. 5C is a list of budget amendments, most of these being recognizing new revenue coming in. The first one being lead and copper line compliance capital project. 500,000 of that is money coming in. 10,000 of that is to close that loan, which will be coming from the water fund. C2 is a Kiwanis Club grant for $2,000. C3, the fire department Motorola radios. This is actually an appropriation for fund balance for radios that were purchased in a different fiscal year. Just never were paid for, and we were not aware of that until they sent us some bills. 6C, insurance proceeds, garage door, $12,490. C5, acceptance of North Carolina Chief of Police grant that was just mentioned, that's $28,000. C6, insurance proceeds, parks and recreation van, $1,539. C7, insurance proceeds, pool storage building, $1,099. C8 is insurance proceeds from a wrecked police vehicle of $35,448. C9 is additional funding for the purchase of a vehicle coming from the police forfeiture fund in the amount of $15,000. C10 is stormwater GIS data technical support services in the amount of $21,000. And we actually want to take that from general fund balance and not stormwater fund balance that we talked about on Thursday. And lastly, I know Council Member Hay had asked this to be on new business. We can pull it if you want, but we have C11, which is funding of the senior meal program at $24,000. That will continue that meal as it was before the cuts until the end of the fiscal year, which will be June 30 of '25.
Does Councilman Hay want that to be pulled?
And if there's no discussion needed, then I'm fine for it to be just stay in consent, but.
Everybody in agreement? Okay.
I only have good things to say, so
Yeah.
I.
And then 5D, the last item in the consent agenda, would be a resolution accepting additional professional services for stormwater infrastructure planning and approving agreement with WK Dixon. And that is in relation to C10. And that's your consent agenda.
And that is going to be how much?
$21,000.
Are you talking about D?
D, yes.
But we may, you just suggested that we have the funding for the meal site as C11? No.
The C11, that's what we have in this packet. C11, we
Okay.
have the mill site down from that item. Item 5D relates to C10, I'm sorry.
Okay.
All right. Just want to say that everything with the exception of number 1, we don't have to go ahead. We're pulling money from fund balance, but none of that has to be repaid. The only thing that's going to have to be repaid is number 1.
$500,000 zero interest loan, that's correct.
What's the length of that loan? How long do we have to pay that back?
We don't have that term, I don't have that information yet. I'm guessing it'll probably be 10 years at least, if not longer. So 10 years at zero interest would be $50,000 a year. If it's longer, then it would just be cheaper on us, but I don't have that information yet.
So if we were to hear of unsavory conditions after the fact,
Yeah,
what
let's say
happens?
if it was a 2-year loan, for example, the terms.
Oh, well, it's not gonna be too long. It's just not, the revolving fund water loans are typically 10 years and longer. They're not 2-year loans.
And then also, for C10, what was the reasoning for moving that from general fund to water?
We want to use the stormwater fund money that's in fund balance to do matches for projects, is what we would prefer to do with that stormwater fund money. For example, the Fairway Drive project we're getting ready to undertake, the 50% match from that came from our stormwater fund. And I know that's what we've talked about for, I guess, since the stormwater fund has been in existence, is using that match, or using that fund balance for match money for projects.
Right now, do we have a plan for Fairway?
Yes, we have a stormwater project that we're working on right now for that.
Okay, and does that come under Hiawassee and then go ahead and get into the ditch?
I'm not
On
sure.
the golf course side?
I'm not sure,
Where you
Mr.
pick
Mayor.
up Water?
It hasn't been designed yet. I can show you the preliminary design. Happy to do that.
If you would give me a copy of it, please. All right. Do I hear a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So
Any questions, any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. We don't have anybody signed up for the public hearing for the text amendments. So, Josh, lead us to the text amendments, please.
So I will have Jessica come up and lead you through the text amendments. I will say the applicant is here for the public hearing, and she just spoke. Jessica?
All right. Have a brief PowerPoint just to walk through this request. So this proposed text amendment is for mobile retail vendors, and it was, as presented to you, was unanimously recommended from the planning board. Thank you. So on July 10th, we received the text amendment application. So this was generated by Cassie, of course, I hope I'm saying your last name correctly.
Yes.
Great. And on July 22nd, the planning board considered the text amendment application that would amend section 5.15 mobile food vendors. That was the original request. And we worked with the planning board and decided to make its own separate ordinance instead of trying to finagle something that's food into also retail, because the food ordinance is very specific to the requirements related to food safety, fire prevention, things like that. So we're back through the minutes from the planning board meeting, and there was a discussion of the type of retail they wanted to include, but it was not distilled into a definition. So I'll bring that back to you, the definition, next month, put it back on the planning board agenda. So right now, we will just use the broad definition of retail that we currently have for this one. But the idea is that it will be more vintage, antique, handmade, artisanal types of housewares, personal goods, clothing, and things of that nature. Planning board has proposed that these mobile retail vendors be allowed in central business, highway business, light industrial, heavy industrial, neighborhood mixed use in traditional neighborhood development in the Cheshire area. And that in some districts you would be allowed to have one per parcel, and that in some you would be able to have up to 6. And so that would be more like a court, up to potentially. And that there would not be a limit per district. It would require a temporary use permit, and this would be good for 1 year. You would have to have a permit for each location that you are operating, and it would be reviewed, and you could reapply after 1 year. They can operate on private, non-residential property with permission of the owner, so you cannot put this up on a public street, you cannot put it in a park or a sidewalk. And this does not relate to anything that is a special event the town is having. This is completely unique at that. It can be a primary or a secondary use. It has to meet the setback requirements for that district. And they should not be set up within 10 feet of the structure. There needs to be sufficient space for maneuvering in the lot, having pedestrian access, and emergency response vehicle is required. The site triangle must be maintained, and these are all referenced through the code. It just has to continue to follow the rest of the code. And the parking requirement is 1 on-site parking space per mobile food vendor, except in CD where there are no parking minimums. You cannot create so much, reduce the parking that is required on site. So if you are setting up in front of Blue Ridge Biscuit and they only have the bare minimum of parking spaces required, you cannot go and take up their required parking spaces. You have to be able to maintain those. And small signs, they're cantilevered, or pole sign is allowable. The site must be maintained and cleaned, picking up trash and litter at the end of each day. Temporary toilet facilities are permissible. Permanent water and sewer connections are not permitted. The temporary signs, seating, or merchandise, or anything that you set up outside for your operations must be brought in at the end of the day. And I thought there was a slide that said questions. That's the general gist of what is being proposed. It is very similar in structure and some of the requirements for the site that we did for the food vendors. We wanted it to be consistent. And Planning Board was comfortable with having, trying this out, even in a combination of these courts versus single locations and not having maximums in districts because the special use permits are valid for only 1 year. Any questions for me?
I have a clarification question. I'm seeing under site maintenance, number 2, my item says the use of temporary toilet facilities is not permitted. Did I misunderstand that? I don't know that this changes my view, but I don't want to get clarity about that.
I may have messed up when I was editing the PowerPoint. Whatever's in the ordinance is what came from the Planning Board meeting.
I'm looking at the summary, and so I will try to find it in the ordinance.
It says no.
Yes, it says no.
C2.
Okay. So that's what we're going with.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Can you just help me visually figure this out? Like, in the central business district, where would a mobile retail vendor be?
Not many places, is the short answer. There is a private lot, between the Jubrilli and our fathers, conceivably they could ask to put one there. They could kind of mess up the minimum parking, but there are not many spaces in the central business district.
Neighborhood mixed use one mobile vendor in a neighborhood could?
So our neighborhood mixed district is just concentric.
Oh, I know the traditional neighborhood development, up to 6 mobile vendors permitted per parcel.
So you'll see, yes, that was the request, and that's from planning board, the recommendation. There is a separate revision to the text amendment you will see in your packet that is specific to that district, because they are not they have their own separate standalone chapter.
Talking about Cheshire?
Yes.
Yeah, gotcha.
I was wondering why they didn't show up in that table of
Yes.
permitted uses.
That is
Gotcha.
why they
Okay,
have
thank you.
their own unique little section. So that section is in there. It maintains their percentages of types of uses that have to be in their mix as approved.
I have several questions, but should we open the public hearing?
Good, let her speak, and then I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Are you,
Okay.
you're ready? So we hear a motion to open up the public hearing. So all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Anybody wish to come forward and speak? Not wanting to rush things, but not seeing anybody, I will go ahead and ask for a motion to close the public hearing. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I think now we could go ahead, if we want to hear a motion, and then do the discussion.
May I ask a few questions before we do a motion?
Go ahead.
Are they allowed to sell food and drink or anything like that?
No, that would be separate.
That would be
The mobile food truck ordinance would apply to that.
And is it actually required to be a mobile structure? I mean, could it be a tent? Could it be?
That is what's going to have to be better defined based on the conversation from the minutes that we reviewed as being self-propelled or pulled, which is where I think this is going, not a tent.
Not a tent. So mobile in some capacity?
Yeah.
Okay, not necessarily with a motor, but.
Right.
Okay, generators, are generators allowed, to power this?
I do not know how, some of these probably have onboard power source. I have no idea. I do not know. I've not operated one. So their power source is, I do not know.
So can I ask a follow-up?
Please.
On that? So as defined, it would be between the mobile retail vendor and the owner or whoever on the site is permitting them to use that space they could potentially be giving them electricity or
Yeah.
hooking that up.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think that's one thing we need to consider. If there's not access to electricity, then we start using generators. And if you've been to several of these, if you don't have a real quiet generator, it can be quite a nuisance. I mean, the decibel level can get pretty high. So I think that's something that
Especially
needs
if there's
to
6
be,
of them.
needs to be
doing it
addressed.
all together. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. A non-residential property, right? They cannot, so you couldn't set up an instance driveway
No,
across
sir.
the street from the park or something? Okay. And then, are they required to be moved at any point? I mean, or can they just be a permanent mobile
So
structure?
they could be there for a year based
Up
on.
to a year.
Yeah.
And then, but if then they apply to get a new license or a new permit,
Mhm.
then they can just stay?
They could stay.
Okay.
I do feel like I should probably clarify that my suggestions to planning board were a little bit more conservative than this, particularly because we have not done this before, and for some of the reasons that you've expressed, so 6 on one side with no cap in the district makes me a little nervous. That's more than I would personally prefer, but it is not what was recommended. So I want to make sure you know that you have the same tools that planning board has in making these decisions, that you can cap them per district. And you can monkey with these numbers to temper some of these potential impacts.
So I guess I'm just trying to understand, so if I were to buy a lot in one of the zones it's permitted. And it was just a vacant lot, so it didn't have, it was non-residential. I could essentially build in some of the zones, build a mobile vendor park and have 6 trucks or 6 mobile vendors park indefinitely, basically, every year they could.
Yes, so where you see these more typically are much larger cities with larger lots that need to be put to use for some period of time before a larger permanent business comes in. And so it's not, I don't typically see these courts set up indefinitely in smaller towns. I think of places like Chicago and Austin, Texas, and where you have these larger lots that are waiting for the downtown to expand or some infill to come in that prime spot. They're not thought of as being these permanent fixtures or a use that is even there for terribly long. So it's a little different. It's application in our land use mix, I think. It's not that it can't be done. It's not that you can't do it for a year and see how you like it and revisit it. But it is typically applied in a different environment.
I'm not against mobile vendors at all, to clarify. What makes me a little nervous is if we were to have, a lot like that, and then, like where they, the property value is not of that same one with the structure on it, right? A stormwater fee, they maybe qualify for something different than if they were a business.
These are good questions. Yes.
I guess what are the downstream ramifications if suddenly everyone was building mobile parks and mobile vendor parks instead of their permanent businesses?
They're definitely different than if you're having a brick and mortar setup. They're taxed differently, and how their stormwater would be influenced by a number of factors, if they even triggered it at all. But there are a lot of questions to ask, and if you wanted to, you can send it back to planning board with questions and concerns and see a revised version, or you can revise it as you see fit tonight.
I think I still have some questions around kind of generators. I don't want to rush through this process and not know what other options are and kind of the feasibility of that for folks wanting to operate these, and power source feels like a pretty important component. And then I have a little pause on the having no max per district. I'm wondering if this is something where we either extend the public hearing, send it back to the planning board, just to gather some more information so we can do this thoughtfully. I'd love to see examples of how other towns have scaled this in. And
Similar towns to our size, or just the use
are there
itself?
even comparable numbers there?
I'm not very familiar with the court model in smaller towns with retail.
Our applicant is indicating that they would like to speak. And
I'm just saying I could speak to a lot of the questions. If it's allowable, I don't know what is allowable.
If you don't want her to speak on your time.
We have to open them.
I want to put that before the whole council. Yeah,
You do.
I'm just making an observation.
All right. Are we in agreement to reopen the public hearing? So we have a motion.
So moved.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we'll use that. Casey?
I just didn't know what was appropriate under the circumstances, so thank you for the clarity. I personally have run one of these courts in Austin, Texas. I was a member of it. It was an all-female owned. We had Airstreams, we had a child's shop, we had my shop, it was great, and she's correct.
It's typically run on commercially owned property. Oftentimes that property is going to be developed into something larger, or as is Austin, Texas growing the way that it's growing. You know, it's a fairly defined temporary situation. So under these circumstances, there are caps for the different districts, but that we chatted about quite a bit in the planning board. Your question about generators, typically no, we are not on a generator. The relationship between the tenant and the owner of the property is usually where you access a very small amount of energy. So I'm all LED or lighting. My draw is very, very, very minimal. So typically, along with safety measures in order to get that electricity from whatever building that you're closest to, is what is applied. So no, we're not going to be making a bunch of noise. Where I'm parked currently in Cheshire, I'm already attached to the grid, so I'm on electricity. So that's not an issue. You'd like to change that language, I'm more than happy with that. Not that it's up to me. And per capita, the size of your town, so in Austin, Texas, 1.2 million people, we only had 8 of us. We were all in one place. So the fear of there being suddenly this mob of retail organizations that are going to be combined in one spot, creating a problem, is probably not of the greatest concern, considering the population and the fact that none exist here, and it's taken me 6 months just to have the conversation about getting a permit. So, for whatever that helps, is there any other, the generator question, electricity, I'm not interested in, you know, I spoke with Stephanie of Shiprobe. There's a private lot next to her that the entire female-owned retail area there are in very big support of me even having a chat with the owner of that to park there. Once again, it's a small little private alcove lot that's right there, and she has been actually promoting me being there because it would be camaraderie. So I went and spoke to many of the independent retailers to see how they felt about me being in town. Everybody seems to be very supportive of it. So, but I completely understand your concerns. Is there anything else?
That was really helpful, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Anybody else wish to come up with this second public?
I would ask,
Well, please come up.
yeah, sure, just as a nosy citizen. Is your business already established? I mean, we saw a video of a picture of a train car.
That's correct.
Is that what you're using?
Yes.
And I was confused about your reference to Cheshire. What does this have to do with Cheshire?
I'm currently parked there,
Oh, you are?
and part of what we're discussing and the reason why that particular TND district is allowing a slight more there is that we're trying to create a small population of activity in the particular area where I'm parked at Highway 9 and Jane Jacobs Road.
Gotcha.
Nowhere else
Okay.
at the moment, and we,
But this is about giving you opportunity to locate within the town limits.
that's correct. So the different districts only allow, for instance, just one of me on a particular parcel as long as I'm not limiting the parking.
Yeah.
So as long as I have the personal relationship with the owner of the property and their permission to park there, access to electricity from them, potentially going back to the mobile toilet, the toilet issue, usually you have an agreement with that owner to use the facilities. So if I had someone working with me or working for me part-time, they would then have an agreement with that owner to use whatever the closest, facilities are in order to give that opportunity, so.
And how would your business be moved?
It's actually mobile, it's a bus.
It's a bus.
So I drive her, yes.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Not? Motion to close the public hearing.
So, right?
All in favor? Aye. I do think that we ought to think seriously about, even though she's on electricity and doesn't need a generator, that I think that, and she doesn't want a generator, but there again, there will be others that may come in. I think it needs to be addressed, and addressed in a manner such that there is a cap on the amount of decibels coming from that, because I've been to places where there was one and you couldn't even hardly give the order to the person because the generator was just so gone loud. So I think that's something that needs to be considered.
I think that's a good point. Some, and we discussed this in planning board as well, in that Cassie's very experienced, has a lovely shop. But when we make these decisions, we're not making them based on necessarily those conditions. You're opening that up to any number of things, and we can't specify things maybe as narrowly as we would want in order to control community feel, appearance, and all of those things. So more detail and these sorts of questions are very good to ask.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I'd be amenable to either specifying the number of decibels, I have to do my research on what is reasonable, but, or just saying that generators are not permitted, as kind of an update to this.
Generators are permitted for food trucks, right?
They're not only plugged in, but they are loud. So they're all different. They're all different. Some of them have power set up and they're there for a very long time. Some of them roll in for a Saturday morning and they're gone.
Oh, I think it's a real valid concern about the noise level. I'm no expert on decibels, but if somebody could suggest, I'll just say, if we could insert some regulation around the number of decibels that are permissible, I'd be okay with moving forward with this tonight.
It's probably cleaner just to they or allow them to let the planning board research that at their convenience.
I don't want you to keep big decibels tonight, but.
So can we start a little more constricted?
So we're gonna pull that out
No, I think
Add it as a limitation.
as a restriction, limitation on that. It's not in here about,
Just add
they have
that.
not gone in and defined power source.
There are no, you can just put no generator.
Yeah.
just one clarifying question. You mentioned that you were going to work on a more narrow definition. So tonight, we'd be voting on something that was much broader. Is that right?
It's the same definition for retail that you have in the current land use code for any other retail.
Okay, and then the process would then be the planning board would work on a more narrow definition and bring that back
Yes.
before us.
Mhm.
Okay. And is that like something you're actively working on?
It was discussed in the meeting, but it wasn't distilled as a definition vote. And so I would feel more comfortable rehashing that conversation and distilling it to a vote on a definition.
Sure, great.
I would appreciate that.
Can I ask one clarification? The idea of backing up and leaving, cleaning the side or leaving?
Yes.
Yes, at the end of each day.
Mhm.
When is that? Because each day would be 11:59.
I think it says operating hours in the actual in the text. All temporary signs, seating, and merchandise must be removed or secured within the mobile unit during non-operating hours.
Right, what are they? What would be a non-operating hour?
I guess when you're not there and open to the public.
I know, can that be
Just-
11:59,
do you wanna make
30
it a-
seconds?
Yes.
That's what I'm saying is, if you were concerned about that condition, I think you would need to be more clear about the time.
Is that something that would be specified in the permit application?
It would
Hours
need-
of operation?
It would need to be in the ordinance and then reflected on the permit application.
I'd like that added.
Yeah, I would suggest, just not to extend beyond some time, whether it's 9 PM or whatever. I hate to reopen another public hearing just to get some feedback, but I would suggest that, because right now it's a little unclear with it.
I mean, if we were gonna add times, I would have it be a little broader, in case they were selling, I don't know, headlights to run a group at 7 in the morning or something like that, I would be okay with that. So like 6 to 10 or something like that would be.
Sounds good.
So we're gonna put specific time.
Yeah, I would just say operating hours could be, maybe between the hours of 6 and 10.
6 a.m. and 10 p.m.
Yeah.
Everyone agree to that? Agree. So that's gonna be,
So I would put this under B, operating location and requirements. I think that's as plain as anything. Make 9 and 10. 9B, no generators are permitted, and 10B, hours of operation are from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Between the hours of 6 a.m. and 10.
I'm in support of moving forward today, but just for the record, I'd love to encourage planning board to go ahead and work on that definition, and also maybe revisit the no limits on her zone.
Agreed.
You got it.
And just to let you know, I may have brought this the last time while ordinance was presented. A text amendment requires a statement of consistency. You've got it baked into the ordinance, but it's a good idea as part of the motion, if you move to adopt the ordinance, that you also say including the statement of consistency and reasonableness that's contained therein. So it's clear from the record that you've considered the statement of consistency in your deliberation.
Which is the third whereas.
everybody clear? Everybody got it? So, I hear a motion.
I move that, we go ahead and approve with, upon recommendation of the planning board, the following text amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan and reasonable in the public interest because it promotes local and lawful design and reliable economy and promotes general safety and welfare of the community.
With the two amendments.
With the two amendments, 9 and 10.
Amendments 9 and 10.
Motion's on the floor. Any more discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Unanimous. Very good.
And Wes, you'll expound, when we say 9 and 10, just expound with, in the minutes, what was stated by John.
9A, new business shared parking agreement with Black Mountain Primary School.
So hopefully we'll be continuing to do these every meeting or so for a little bit. At the school board's meeting this week, on their consent agenda, they approved a parking agreement for us to use their parking spaces after school hours during and on weekends. So after 5 p.m. during the week and on weekends. And it has a 2-year period of time before we will revisit it. And it includes all the same language as the parking agreement with the doctor's office. We will put signs up directing folks over there. We will provide a trash can and things like that. It does look a little different. The town attorney revised it to make sure we had all the language required for the general statutes, but it more or less is the same thing.
Does that mean that we need to update that?
Oh, it's all already in the works. Yep.
Great.
Spaces.
It's about 80.
38.
No, about 80 total.
Okay, well, it lists here,
Oh, sorry.
it lists here 38.
38 is on that one parcel, and they're seeing if they will add the other parcel. They forgot that the school owns 2 pieces of property right there. So we'll capture the other ones on the website.
They have to consider them something.
Yeah.
I was like, those are different numbers.
Personally, I'm a real fan of fully utilizing the pavement that's already out there in a really efficient manner. And I appreciate that we're looking at it, all the nooks and crannies and finding places that we can utilize. It just makes good sense that we're efficient in our use of the parking available. So I'm a big fan.
Yeah, absolutely. One quick question that I just thought of. Obviously, like, today, before we approve this, if someone parked in there and was there in the morning for school, they could call a tow truck and have the car towed. If it became a larger problem now that we have public parking signs and things like that, at what point is it our responsibility as a town to manage calling those tow trucks?
So there is not a tipping point, and the way they're worded now, we can call a tow truck or they can call a tow truck if something's being violated. I think that's why they're only built in for 2 years, and we will sign them that include the parking hours that are allowable, and that towing will be enforced.
Okay, great. Yeah, I would just hate for it to become an issue where all of these businesses are in schools now are not having to worry about, cars that calling tow trucks at 6 in the morning.
Well, truth be told, what I'm told is that people park there a lot of the time already, and they like the idea that now we have some relationship to have these conversations, to have a trash can, to encourage it during the proper hours and try to control what is naturally occurring already, and try to structure it a little bit.
Great.
Is there a motion?
I move to approve the shared parking agreement with Black Mountain Primary School at 301 State Street as presented.
Any discussion? Not all in favor?
Aye.
Just one last thing I want to say about the parking. I'm glad we're trying to expand some, but I certainly hope the board would encourage and look towards trying to secure that little bit of land next to the parking lot we have south of the railroad. I think we could possibly pick that up 30 feet, add about another 15 to 20 parking spaces, and then possibly get, and then in the future, we could have an ability, if we needed to put a single deck on there, so that we would have parking for downtown businesses. I think we need to consider downtown businesses.
Item 9B, update consideration of lead and copper service lines compliance capital project ordinance and resolution accepting the funding from North Carolina Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund, DWSFR loan program. So we talked a little bit about this in consent. This is the actual capital project and the resolution to accept the funding for the lead and copper rule project that Jessica is heading up. And this is a lot of work. So with this money, we're able to have some other folks help us, engineering firms help us get through some of this. And as I mentioned, I don't have the year of when this has to be paid back, but I know it will be a long-term loan. These are typically long-term loans. But this will get us a lot further on our lead and copper compliance than what we had budgeted, which was about $200,000 that we were going to try to use.
Two things concern me. Number one, I see here this is prior to the October 2024 deadline.
After it might make more sense after I do this, and then I might answer some of your questions.
And also the other thing is I don't feel comfortable in entering into a large loan like that without knowing the terms of the loan. It's just not a good business.
I don't think we can, they're not going to generate the documents until we say, we have to move the ball forward, and then they will provide us with the documents.
I understand that, but certainly a phone call to them and say, what's the time frame for payback? I mean, surely they know that. It doesn't have to be in writing, they could give that to us verbally. How come we can't find that out?
I'm sure I probably did.
I just think it's just good business to know when you go ahead and commit for a $500,000 loan, to know how much time that you have.
I think the important thing on this one is it's a zero interest loan. Many municipalities are not able to get anything, and if they did get anything, they had to pay it back with interest. So I think that is very important for this project.
Still stands. We need to know how long it's going to take to pay it back. Because even without any interest, that's gonna impact our budgets for the future.
Correct. Sure will.
I'd like to hear the presentation so we all understand what this is about.
So I'm going to give you a little bit of update of where we are with the inventory and what this loan will pay for to complete the inventory. And before I go into it all, I'll say our, terms that we hate, which are unfunded federal mandate, right? Because that's what this is. This is not optional. And so there are two elements you might remember, because we tried to go over this before when we were first introducing this. There's the inventory, and then there is the replacement. The initial inventory is due October 16th of 2024. These funding sources were originally intended to be spent down by that time, but the state is still making these allocations. So they are going to extend that for us. Once we say, yes, we are here to participate, then they will provide a different date based on the scope of work, which is already, the deadline for that was September 1st. We returned it in a few days early, and they have until the 15th of September to approve the scope of work. And then there is the replacement. If you think $500,000 is bad, just wait till we get to that part. We will learn more about that in October of this year when the final rule on that comes down from the EPA. So far, we've done the initial inventory development, data review, map creation, developed websites, had workshops, sent out mailers, surveys, drafted the replacement plan. It's not totally done yet, but it is largely drafted. And other administrative milestones that are required for all of this. From the available data that we had, we could identify 25% of our lines as being non-lead, non-galvanized. So we were immediately able to do that. That means we have 75% unknowns. McGill has gone through all the things that we've created and said that town staff has mitigated about $100,000 worth of work by just jumping in and doing what we were told, which is generally how we work back there. So we applied for the DWI funding for inventory. We did not qualify for loan forgiveness. There are several criteria for that, but largely it just came down to being too affluent of a community. So we received the $500,000 interest, which was, I received notification, and Josh was coming back to the office, and I thought, oh, I'm going to make him so sad when I tell him this, but he was relieved, and I was bummed because I was really hoping for that forgiveness. And so we drafted a scope of work for the first milestone and it was reviewed by our engineers to make sure that they thought everything was doable, and it's since been submitted. So just the anticipated lead and copper rule improvements, LCRI, is next month. And this is the rule that's going to likely submit within 10 years, replacing all of the unknowns and galvanized needing replacement and lead lines. Maintaining this inventory, the inventory that we're working on, it has to live in perpetuity. It's going to change how we do tap sampling. It's going to lower lead action levels. We don't have lead action levels. We're not going to have them in the future, even based on the numbers we anticipate getting. But this is what will be coming down. It will broadly strengthen protection against lead and reducing exposure. But this $500,000 is broken up into a variety of tasks. There's the planning and development, which is about $70,000. The identification of service line material at $340,000. I think ultimately we'll probably be able to put more into that. Data collection and management, public outreach, administrative support, and coordination. I have 2 4-inch binders for just the rules around the inventory. If I don't identify the line at your house, I'm going to have to send you a letter and tell you, using language from the federal statute, of what that your line has not been identified yet. And I'm going to have to do that every year until it is identified. So there's a huge administrative burden created out of this process. This funding through this $500,000 will see us through they'll get us our deadline for the 16th of October met, and then all of the milestones after that for compliance, because every letter we send, we have to send them a copy, and it has to be documented that we have to send them a roster of who was notified, and all of these things. So we'll get through one cycle of this compliance, and we will repeat that year after year. So this is the timeline. So you see that we have this planning period in the fall, and get our first submission in October. In January, the engineering firm will handle all the procurement for the field work. In February, the soft dig will start taking place, and that means we will have trucks digging holes and men sticking their heads in meter boxes, identifying these lines. You are not supposed to, you're supposed to look 18 inches away from the meter.
When you clarify, when you say they're identifying lines,
Yes, so the service line is there's the meter and there's a service line to it and the service line from it to your house. We have to identify both sides.
right, but what are you looking for?
We are looking to see what kind of material it is made out of, and we have to document what type it is. And so it'll be plastic, non-lead, it'll be galvanized that's never been downstream from lead, or it'll be galvanized unknown its relationship to lead, which becomes galvanized needing replacement, or it will be lead or copper. So there are there's a line of them. We anticipate our biggest percentage is going to be galvanized require replacement, because they're so old that there isn't documentation that they were never downstream from lead. So that data collection will take place. We'll, after the field work ends late next summer, we will update the inventory with all of the data, and by November we'll send out our next cycle of letters for what we've identified or not identified, and that will be done. That we could spend every penny of $500,000 just on digging holes and not identify every line in town, which is what I've learned. And what they will do is they will model, because we've already mapped everything, we'll find areas that are highly concentrated sections of old pipes that are likely to require replacement. So, and we will leave them unknown, and they will go into the replacement category. We will really concentrate our resources on identifying lines that might not need to be replaced, because that saves us heartburn when it comes time for replacement. So this is the strategy that everybody is using to stretch their dollars. If you look at a street and every house is from 1925, those are galvanized lines that are going to have to be replaced. So we don't need to spend $5,000 a day on a contractor identifying those lines just to come back and note that. We would rather spend those resources and hopefully find in areas where there's a greater likelihood that the lines will not need to be replaced.
And do I remember correctly in previous presentations you've shared that if someone knows what their service line is made out of, so that someone happens to know that about their property, they can report that
they can.
to the town?
There's a website for where that information can be collected. We're also collecting it in the field when we're doing work incidentally and things like that. So everywhere we can even get 2 or 3, we're happy to get it.
Absolutely. And it will go a long way for all of us.
Hopefully more people will fill it out, because it's only been like 15. So, but we are trying to get more. Every time there's a story in the newspaper or after one of these meetings where there's a recap, we get a little flush of folks who report. So, so that is helpful. So that is that first. Those where those deliverables will plug in time-wise and get us through all of that. And that's it. That's how it will be utilized.
So every municipality in the United States has to do this?
Every public drinking water system, whether you are a private neighborhood, a private system, you all are engaged in this.
So are some of these, we're small, but they're smaller. How are they?
They're getting loan forgiveness.
Administrative burden of.
The engineers are doing all of it. The firms are coming in.
For all of that.
Yeah. They also have different rules, thus, if you, the very small systems have different requirements than we do.
Couple of questions. You've already identified, say, 25%. Is that the main trunk lines coming in?
No.
Or is that individual lines at the person's house?
That is only the service lines.
And define the service line, because I'm saying trunk lines and service lines are gonna connect. You got a main line coming through Blue Ridge Road, and there's a line coming off going to Blue Ridge Assembly Drive. Is that defined as a service line?
No, that is only what is going from the main, that is what's coming from the main line to the meter box, from the meter box to your house, is that tiny little line. And those are the only things inventoried in this requirement. It is not the main lines, it is not the distribution system. It's only those very small service lines, those laterals.
On those laterals then, so basically at this point, identification is only visual. We're not doing any type of chemical, we're not doing any type of filtration.
That is correct. The engineering firm modeled what would work best and where we could get the most houses identified for the money, and this was what they came up with.
Is there anything from the feds that says, or EPA, that says then that if you don't have any lead coming into your house, then you don't, it doesn't matter what the line is?
Like if you were to water test, is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Um,
Or water test some of the tools in your toolbox?
we could not, it would be inefficient for us to mix and match our methodologies, like of how we were identifying. It would cost us more to do what you're describing, because the methods that they require for the testing is not as simple as just.
So it's just a visual? So we really
Correct.
don't know? I mean, we're in there doing a visual test.
Yeah.
And we're hoping that what we see is not going to be producing. But if you really wanted to know, you test the water. I mean, that's the best way to do it. Help me on this, right? When you say galvanized and never downstream from lead, go over that again. I'm not quite understanding what
I
that
can
means.
resend the original presentation that broke all of this out, but basically there are galvanized lines that are required to be replaced if they were if they were coming from old lead pipes at some point. Or
I just didn't understand what you said, never downstream from lead.
Yes, so if they were connected to a lead pipe at some point that has since been replaced, that galvanized line would be required to be replaced.
If in the past it was from a lead pipe.
That's right, but if you can't prove that it was never downstream, then you have to assume that it was.
We have to presume that there's something, that it's been contaminated, unless we can prove that it's not.
Essentially, yeah, you have to err on the side of safety and say that if you do not have a map from the day that that distribution system was installed that said the material of that line, then you have to assume the greater risk.
So you're gonna want all homeowners to help assist this, and I think that's good. But if in fact a homeowner wanted to go ahead and have an ionic filter test on the water and prove that there was no lead, that should be going ahead enough to say, you don't need to be replaced. And that pipe is okay.
I would have to look back at the requirements for the methods of what type of tap testing they will accept. But you can also just look at where your water lines come into your house and identify the line.
Yeah, but what I'm saying though is, again, you don't know for sure unless you really do a test on water. But I'm just saying that for the homeowner, if the homeowner wanted to do the test and then prove, I don't have any lead in the water. Here's the results.
Well, we don't have any lead in our water. We test all the time, but it doesn't keep us from having to comply with any of this.
So,
They were on loan repayments 30 years, by the way.
Yeah, right, because we test the water line.
Oh,
We
yeah.
test the water all the time, right?
We have to send off tests every week.
And we have not identified lead as an issue.
That's correct.
Yeah, it's just a permit.
But it doesn't.
But that
Yeah,
doesn't.
but we're just on the
But
well.
this inventory
We
is
test out of
required.
offices too. In places, town hall will test.
Schools.
the inventory of what kind of material we have in the ground that makes up those service lines is required by the federal government.
Yeah.
So I think that's fine to encourage folks to test, but we can't. I'm not gonna play around with what the federal government is requiring us to
I'm
report.
just asking some questions here,
Yeah,
trying to help
yeah.
out the citizens, because, you know, as you said before, it's gonna be up to the citizens to go ahead and place that line.
No,
It's up to us.
it's gonna end up being on us.
It's gonna be taxpayers.
To the meter.
No.
To the private, to the house,
To the
it's
house.
all on our dime, every bit of it.
Well, we need to.
I've been
find-
scratching my head for months, Craig, yes.
Well, it's a private property, so then you get into a question of liability, and your public people going on private property to work. It's just,
It's quite it is, I mean, I really don't want to focus on replacement at this point. We'll see what happens when LCRI comes out in October. But I mean, I've read all the rules, it's about 268 pages. And if you decline having your line replaced, then we have to give you a filter with X number of months of cartridges. And I have to send you a letter, and then I have to send that letter. It is quite.
Those ionic filters are expensive,
It's not one of those.
because you have to have that in order to, because lead will be in solution. And a regular filter is not gonna filter out lead if it's in solution. All right, if y'all, we want to discuss it more, say vote.
Really, we're voting to accept the funding, right? We know the term's now 30 years.
Hear a motion?
I move to accept the capital project ordinance as presented and accept the funding.
Any more discussion? If not, all in favor? Unanimous?
All right, 9C, Broadway Street parking. So this is, we had a citizen comment about this. I know we've talked about this many times in the past, but we're gonna talk about it again. And we're hoping we maybe get some direction from council if they wanna see something change there. We need to speak to DOT as well. I don't think they're gonna care about the parking spaces so much, but I think there may be some other things that we talked a little bit about in the agenda meeting, that if we do this, then other things could happen. That street's gonna get a little wider, as we talked about, which may make people go a little faster. The way it stands right now, it is kind of traffic calming, although it is unsafe. People are having to slow down out there, so.
I think at one time we talked about, and here we've got two options, turn it into parallel. I'm wrong. So at one time we talked about keeping them angular, but saying compact
We can
only.
do that.
So I'm not saying I'm advocating that, but I just wanted to throw that into the mix.
So I think what staff needs really is, this sort of came across our desk not terribly long ago, just a week or so. We need a little bit more time to evaluate the unintended consequences of the different changes and be able to bring you a more thorough report. If you do go parallel, you're going to lose about 8 spaces. What does that mean to parking demand in the area? It does add about 12 foot of pavement that is not allocated. And so it would create different traffic conditions, but there are ways to mitigate that. There are different types of ways to do that. And I can bring you those options and some costs associated with those so you can look at all the variables that you might want to consider.
Yeah, I find that really helpful to have all that information, know the options. But if all you're asking for tonight is, do we want you to do that work? Are we interested in looking at that? I would be interested.
I'm of two minds, because I think we just need to make them parallel, but I can be prudent and patient and say, yes, we can look at work.
How much information that we got from local businesses on that.
Well, that's one of the things that we need. We have not had time to reach out to the local businesses.
I think that's a slap in the face of local businesses to remove parking from outside their businesses.
Well, that's what we want to know, and until we told her tonight whether we were interested, there was no point in getting that info. I think it's real important to find out from businesses.
While you're doing it, I mean, just the variations, so, I mean, it seems to me that the parking spots that are kind of above the Grange are more troublesome than the ones below, so maybe those can remain the same and parallel above. If there's just variations that we can explore. Also, I know there's been a lot of talk, and several requests from various people about a crosswalk in the middle of Broadway. If we can kind of add that to the discussion as well, that might be.
That's a much bigger conversation.
Maybe looking at.
But if we're removing
December.
parking spots, right, if we're adjusting parking spots, then now might be the time, to discuss that, maybe not, I don't know, but if that's a separate issue, then we can,
I just wouldn't want to tie them together, that's all.
you wouldn't want
I wouldn't want to tie, I mean, you can talk about them together, but I wouldn't want to say, we're not doing a crosswalk, so the spaces aren't happening. I just want to make sure they're not connected, if that makes sense. Sure.
I know at our agenda meeting, it was kind of presented as just looking at north of that parking lot that comes behind Broadway and Cherry. But I do, yeah, I mean, I would hope that this would also consider kind of the implications of keeping the diagonal south of that or changing this as well.
The main concern I heard in that comment that was about especially large, long vehicles at the top there when you come through, that was the concern I've heard mostly, and I've experienced it myself. Farther south, it really never bothered me as much, but it's worth considering.
more space down there.
So how about we just bring you some options to look at in November for that whole street there? May not be the crosswalk, but we'll do the parking space options for sure.
If I can ask kind of an adjacent question then about that. Timeline of having the crosswalk along Sutton?
Well, September 11th. You can
Oh.
have
That's true, we're gonna find out.
Next year, 2025.
Okay. That's what gives me pause
I'm sure we
about
am.
really hitting the gas on having a mid-block crosswalk, because we don't know the implications of having the crosswalk where we already have a light, and we don't have to have the flashing beacons and the, 5-year, however long that project is.
Isn't
I
there
know it would be
informational
convenient.
meeting about that on September 11th?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, so, a lot of details, yeah, me too.
So I don't need a vote. I think I've gotten enough head nods to know what we need to do next. 9D is a freeway stop at Richardson Boulevard and Sutton Avenue. If you've been down to the bottom of Sutton, you probably have noticed that it is not very easy to turn right or left at certain times. We did have a new traffic engineer take a look at this. You've got the information in the packet as far as the intersection or always stop control study goes. And they are, of course, recommending that a three-way stop be placed there again. I think at one point it passed.
Yeah, it's a long time.
So I think it's still on the road, the stop arm, and it says stop.
We got it.
So yes, as Josh said, that we just have increasing congestion in this area, and site visibility is a significant problem. So an all-way controlled stop will improve site conditions because you cannot park within 30 feet of stop sign, and it will also stop the traffic. So instead of flooring it to turn right like you do right now and just hope everything's going to be okay, you'll be able to stop and see the vehicle to your left.
And didn't the Active Mobility Commission review
Yes,
all
ma'am,
this as
they
well?
did, and they unanimously supported it as well.
And how much did we pay these then for this?
I do not know. I do not have the invoice in front of me.
Typically, these are around $5,000 or so for an intersection study usually.
I bet it was less than that, but yeah, they're,
Less than that.
we have to have traffic analysis done before we start changing travel patterns for liability purposes to make sure we're not creating problems, whether it be a level of service or a traffic danger.
Well, they produced plenty of numbers, page after page of numbers. I just, if the Active Mobility Commission reviewed it, I respect their opinion a lot. Would be inclined to go along with your recommendation.
It's amazing though, on Richardson, we talk about safety and talk about visual, and yet there's 7 other spaces up through there that the end of the parking spot is right at the entrance to a house or a business. All the way up there to some boulevard.
You're not turning.
It's not travel.
When they come out of their business, when they come out of their driveway,
But they could,
the sign, their car is right there. And if you talk about 30 feet from the
Stop sign, yeah.
From the stop sign, you know. And yet we eliminated a space on Richmond Boulevard going south on the right side there, where the sign says no parking from here to the stop sign, and yet that sign was moved. And that sign, when it was originally there, was 48 feet. And for some reason, the sign got moved. And I don't know who moved the sign, I haven't been able to find out.
That's a dangerous place down there.
That's not a dangerous place right there. 48 feet away from the, all you're doing is just adding an extra parking spot to the ones that were existing there already. I don't know why we did away with that.
Because it's unsafe.
How is it unsafe?
I'm not getting into that discussion in
Oh,
here.
well, wait a
It's
minute,
unsafe.
you can make a statement that it's unsafe,
It is.
but you're not backing it up.
It is unsafe, Mr. Mayor.
How can it be
Can I
unsafe?
finish, please?
How can it be unsafe?
Our police department, our police chief has said it's unsafe, our public works director has said it's unsafe, the business owner said it's unsafe.
So, I challenge that.
Okay.
Do we have a motion on this?
Just real quickly, and there was, a few months ago, we talked about this in the agenda meeting, but a few months ago, there was discussion around making Ridgeway one way.
yes.
Right, and I think that this all kind of ties in. I had asked during the agenda meeting if we should have that all be part of the same discussion, and kind of was told and agreed that those are separate issues, but I do think it all kind of ties in together. So I know that is left an open subject, and there are members of the public who would like to see that kind of decided on one way or the other, so they can plan accordingly. So I'm good to move forward with this three-way stop, but I want to continue this conversation around that, the safety of that area moving forward.
So I would move to approve the three-way stop at the intersection of Sutton and Richardson.
Any discussion? Not all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Next will be discussion of prohibiting unauthorized parking and potential lease agreement in the Norfolk Southern Railroad right-of-way along Sutton Avenue. So the current agreement we have in Norfolk Southern for those parallel spaces that are a little farther west on Sutton is about $2,000 a year is what we pay for those spaces. So I'd anticipate that being similar if you also chose to do that on the other section of Sutton.
How much do we pay for our parking down in the lot south of the railroad?
I'm not sure, I'll have to look at that.
And then we also have those spots across from Town and Country Furniture.
Correct.
And how much are we paying for those?
I don't have that answer either.
So do we even have an agreement?
I'm sure we do, I just didn't look for those specific spaces because I was looking at Sutton Avenue.
Part of all this discussion, because, you know, those spaces there have been there for years and years and years.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you could find that out, please.
Sure.
If you have an agreement.
Happy to do
And if
that.
you do have an agreement, exactly what we're paying for those.
My first reaction to this was whether we should, before we, start putting up signs, whether we should just go ahead and pursue the agreement first and see what they come back with.
If I may, I think it's sort of a yes, like yes and. I've been down there several times with our traffic engineer, and we were with the express purpose of studying the traffic as opposed to down there for other reasons, And his suggestion was to go ahead and sign it, even if it is temporary, while we pursue an agreement with the railroad. It could take some time,
Sure.
like 8 or 10 months, pretty easily. So the issue that we experience on Sutton is with the unauthorized parking is we have cars making a variety of maneuvers into the travel lane. And so some people are going parallel, some people are backing into the traffic. There's not sufficient separation between where people are parking and the travel lanes. And we have a lot of pedestrians walking on Sutton and Ridgeway in that area where these cars are backing out. And so the recommendation from our traffic folks was just to go ahead and temporarily, pause it while we pursue a more, if you want to pursue a more long-term solution.
So the immediacy of this is safety of folks that are walking, driving on the street.
That's right.
And folks pulling it out.
But again, we have the same issue right there across from Town and Country. We have the same issue up on Broadway. I mean, when you're looking at perpendicular parking on Sutton, that's been there for years. So I'm not sure why it's so much more dangerous to have this up there then if that's the case, we need to get rid of the perpendicular parking on the Sutton Avenue, on all Sutton Avenue.
You don't have people walking behind those cars on Sutton Avenue, they have a sidewalk to walk.
Okay, the people that are walking behind the cars on the railroad side are the people getting out of cars or driving them in. Same holds true for across from Town and Country. They're pulling in, they're parking, they're getting out of their cars. Most of the people walking are on the old Sobel House property, the railway yard. So that's why I don't see that it's such a concern.
Okay.
I mean, I just, if we need to get an agreement from Norfolk Southern, fine, but I don't think that's very fair to the businesses there to go ahead and eliminate a bunch of parking.
So you're just saying that you'd rather see pull-in parking and parallel parking installed along there?
Sutton.
And that's the spot we're talking about?
Yeah, just like they're doing now. It may need to give some guidance, that is, to put, maybe even paint something in there, or put the concrete things that keep the cars from going further. Put them in so that people have an idea where to park.
So either way, we've got to talk to Norfolk Southern and get some permission and start sorting that out, right? That would be the first step, and then whether it's pull-in or parallel would be the next step. Is that?
I'd be willing to bet Norfolk Southern probably really doesn't give a hoot.
Well, I'm just saying, we need to start a ball in motion here.
I think that's fine. I think that's fine, but I don't think we need to go ahead and penalize those businesses and let people park there who also go uptown. We're penalizing businesses all over. Let's go to Norfolk Southern, see what it is, but just let people continue to park there.
My concern with the prohibiting unauthorized parking portion before we do the speak with Norfolk Southern is just I think people are probably gonna end up parking further up Ridgeway, along the road. It might just cause a bunch of other issues for people who are visiting businesses down that corner. So I'm inclined to start with speaking Norfolk Southern, before we put up signs. That's just my opinion.
Sorry.
What do you, is that a complete, that be workable? Just,
It's all your decision. I mean, I'm happy to reach out to Norfolk Southern and see what their, take the temperature on a lease agreement.
reach out to them for some, see what they have to say. And move forward from there.
So that's your motion, you want to make a motion that way, and then continue to park, or?
I don't think we need a motion if we're not.
If we don't need a motion, that's fine.
I need nothing.
Okay, great, all right. Very good.
Communication.
So I may not appear to be older than other younger attorneys, but I've been practicing since 1991. When I started practicing in 1991, one of my first assignments was to work with the Regional Water Authority of Buncombe County in the city of Ashburn. And when I was listening to the proclamation for Tom Sowell, I did not hear the fact that he was on that commission. Every time I showed up there for about a decade, it seemed like he was always present. So I just wanted to add on to his accolades.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to read something for Wesley here. So Wesley Barker, Town Clerk of the Town of Black Mountain, North Carolina, has been awarded the prestigious designation of North Carolina Certified Municipal Clerk from NCCMC, which is the North Carolina Association of Municipal Clerks, along with the School of Government and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill for achieving its high educational experience and service requirements. Wesley attained the designation as North Carolina State Certified Municipal Clerk through the completion of the North Carolina Association of Municipal Clerks program, conducted in cooperation with the School of Government of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. As an established member of the North Carolina Association of Municipal Clerks, Wesley joins the 2024 class of municipal clerks from North Carolina who are receiving this state designation through July 2029, North Carolina Certified Municipal Clerk. The NCAMC is a professional organization of city, town, and village clerks from across the state dedicated to the continued growth and development of clerks and their municipalities. Established on November 5th, 1975, the association, among other things, promotes educational and professional development opportunities for municipal clerks to enhance their knowledge and effectiveness. This is no small task, considering the wide array of duties performed by municipal clerks, which often vary from municipality to municipality. The association partners with the North Carolina League of Municipalities, the School of Government of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and the International Institute of Municipal Clerks to meet the needs of each individual municipal clerk. The North Carolina Certified Municipal Clerk Program, is a 5-year designation with requirements for continuing education to sustain and develop the ever-changing knowledge of the profession of municipal clerks. The NCAMC, together with the International Institute of Municipal Clerks, strives to promote educational and professional development to enhance the clerk. Congratulations, Wesley.
Put that in the next newsletter.
That's right.
That's it.
Okay, anybody on the town council want to say anything?
I have a comment, jump in. So I got my property tax bill the other day, I'm sure everybody else did too. And, I got questions about it, and I wanted to just clarify something. In terms of, there seems to be some confusion around the Black Mountain property tax rate and the Black Mountain property tax revenue. So I compiled a table, and instead of reading all these numbers to you, I created a slide, and Wesley agreed to show it. And what it is the Black Mountain property tax rate going back 20 years. So the bottom left corner is 0506, and at that point it was 0.385 cents per $100. And if you go up to the upper right corner, you get the current property, Black Mountain property tax rate, which is 0.321. So I just thought that was real interesting. This is the one part of your property tax bill that the town council has any control over. The revenue is based on assessments, and we don't do that. So I just wanted to, I think it's helpful to me to see how it's been over the last 20 years. And I hope everybody, it's not secret information. It's not like I had to dig deep for it. It's all in the, on the town website. And Wesley, could you put this in the minutes, that table into the minutes for this meeting? Just so if anybody wants to look back at it, it's readily accessible. Thanks.
The way all that revenue comes up is the fact
Excuse me, that was my comment. It was a discussion.
I thought you were finished, I'm sorry.
I am finished, but it wasn't a discussion item, it was just my comment. You've had a lot of time to make comments tonight, and that was mine.
That's not, you always have time to make comments.
I know that,
You
but
have plenty.
this isn't a discussion time.
I don't want to make a comment.
You've had enough comment time.
No, that's not your decision, that's my decision, I'm the mayor.
At the beginning of the meeting, you've had plenty of comment times.
If you look at the agenda that you went ahead and passed, it says communication from the mayor and the town council.
Right, I thought we were done.
So-
I was moving on to town council comments, and I thought you'd already made yours.
No, I had time.
You made a lot.
What I want, exactly, and I will continue. The one thing you need to keep in mind about taxes is that it's difficult to understand exactly how much taxes unless you know the value of your property. You could go ahead and be paying 10 cents, but if your value of your property was $2 million, it's about the same as someone paying 38 cents, and it's 200,000. So you have to look at both in order to get a real good feel for it. In the past, what most boards have done when there's been reevaluation is that there's the term called revenue neutral. So that if the tax on your property is $1,000, and even though your property went up 100%, the tax rate will fall in order that you will still pay $1,000. So that's what we need to keep that in mind.
Yeah, for clarification, that's what this board did 4 years ago when it was the last rebound.
Absolutely. We see our motion to go into closed session.
Before we do that, Michael, at the beginning of the meeting, you had mentioned wanting to have a special call meeting.
Mhm.
Do you have a date proposed for this meeting so that we can?
Yeah, 2 weeks from the night, 6 o'clock.
We'll be here.
So,
Okay.
is this just, is there information that we could present at the next regularly scheduled council meeting?
I had requested before I went on vacation there for this to be put on the agenda for the night.
And we all considered that, yeah.
We didn't know what it was.
We didn't know what it was.
So,
The big topic isn't appropriate for an agenda item, right? We didn't know what we were talking about.
we're talking about the audit that we've been dealing with, that the state has been dealing with, and it's gone ahead and issued a special unit
That you are,
for us.
I'm happy to talk to you offline. I think you've taken that a little differently than it should have been taken. Seriously.
Well,
I'm happy to do that.
that's
And that would
right.
be helpful, I think.
That's right, but
Since it's come up, and I'm sure this conversation is very confusing to most people. I think it would be helpful if maybe Tammy could make a presentation at the beginning of the next regularly scheduled council meeting to just outline the timeline, what's happened, what's the next step, and it's just, it's disconcerting to hear a statement made without any context and, discussion to help people understand. I'm all for transparency and I'm all for having this be laid out in public. There's nothing I'm ashamed of or it's not a secret, but I'm not sure a special call meeting, why? I mean, I just think it's an informational topic that can be shared at the next council meeting. That's my personal
Well, there's
opinion.
been a lot of folks that have been asking me about this, and this has gone on for 2 years now, that we've had issues.
I know exactly. I was sitting in this chair every time. And I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm sure it's good information to help people understand it. A special call meeting, I'm not really sure is so helpful.
I'm confused about the timing because we have an audit that's in process, and so we're gonna have so much more information and so much more up to date about how we're handling things in a couple months' time. So I don't understand why this needs to happen in September.
Folks should ask me, and I would like to be able for us to discuss it in the open and make sure that we understand why some of the things did happen, what's being done to correct these problems. I don't think there's anything out of line about doing that. And also too, as I said at the beginning, I'd like for also to be a question and answer period for public if you wanted to come and ask us questions. That then if you don't want to, that's fine, want to get in, work to respond to that. Because right now, the way we're set up is that we listen to citizen comment, but we don't ever really respond.
Amen.
And I think that would be a good thing to give the public a chance. So somebody has a chance to do this. This is not anything new.
I have no problem discussing the audit, as we've done several times already, and discussing it in a meeting. I mean, I feel like the implication is that we're trying to hide something, and that's certainly not the case. The problem I have is that a special call meeting was called for with no discussion, with no date, and what the subject matter was, and that, I mean,
Sure.
Katie's out of town, I'll have my kids that night, and it's not a great time.
Well, I just throw out that date. Is there a date that y'all would fit that?
I would have to go get my external brain.
Josh,
I can't off the top of
when
my
will
head
you be
answer
back the next week, that week of the 30th? Could we do it that week, the week of the 30th, Michael?
Yeah, just go, well, that'd be 3
Allison
weeks.
will check your.
That'd be 3 weeks.
I'm not confident.
Okay.
So 3 weeks from tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I think staff, we definitely need Josh here to participate in this topic here.
So 3 weeks from tonight.
Yeah, I guess we can talk more about what the expectation is, because I'm a little confused on what this process is. I've never been to a meeting where it was just a question and answer session, and I've done this for 16 years.
Yeah. Well, it can be done. I'm putting the two together. I want to make sure that the public has a chance to ask some questions to us that we can discuss back and forth. Instead of calling us at home. We don't do that. Weeville does it, Monterey does it. They have it. Yeah, yes, it is, John.
No, I'm not shaking my head.
Right.
I know,
I thought you said-
absolutely, yeah.
So as a citizen,
Just that.
no, I just, not the 23rd,
Don't do that.
I can't.
No.
So the 30th,
So do
and
we,
if y'all want.
is this something we vote on?
No, that's the mayor's prerogative.
Mayor can do that.
Yeah.
All right, and the 30th is, I'm unavailable the 30th. Typically with special call meetings, we schedule things very differently than
Yes.
live and voting.
And I pretty much, if I need to change my calendar, I want to know.
Would it be better if we just have Wesley poll the board, Michael, and we'll find a date
Yeah.
that works that week
Yeah.
and
That
see
sounds
if we can
fine.
do that?
That sounds fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it might be cleaner just to have him individually call you.
Yes.
And collect the
Exactly.
information and
Yes.
do a collective email.
Okay, so you'll call? Good, okay. Do I hear a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
All in favor?
All right.
Right.
Take a little break
Thank you,
first.
Mr. Mayor. I'm ready to stay.